Well, hey everyone, my name is Nathan Jones, and if you're new here, welcome. I like to talk about all things movies, specifically Blu-rays, and today we're going to be talking about the Spotlight Challenge, and I'm going to be talking about Alfred Hitchcock, which is what I decided to choose for this Spotlight Challenge. This is a new challenge that I'll be doing a continuous series on my channel, where I'm going to be spotlighting either a cinematographer, an actor, a director, you name it, somebody who is involved in making of a film. I want to watch 10 films that I haven't seen before that are related to this person, and yeah, just kind of conquer my collection, and I hope you can do this as well. But this go around, I decided to go with Alfred Hitchcock because I am sorely missing a lot of his silent pictures, and that's actually what spurred this whole entire thing. Is I actually picked up The Lodger back in early March when the Criterion Collection had their flash sale, and I picked this one up and put it in, and it just like put me on an adventure that I'm like, okay, I want to watch more Hitchcock films because I actually have some in the back catalog on my shelves that I still haven't seen. And actually, I'm still kind of continuously in this particular mode right now. We'll get to that later on in the end of the video. But before we jump into The Lodger and all the other films that I watched, I want to know down in the comment section down below, have you decided to jump into this Spotlight Challenge? If you haven't, I would love to see you jump in if you could, even if just a little bit. And yeah, I would love to know what you've been watching. So let's jump in to the Spotlight Challenge talking about Alfred Hitchcock. All right, so first and foremost, I brought up The Lodger, right? This 1927 classic film in the Criterion Collection, spine number 885. This actually has another silent picture, which we'll talk about in a second too. Both of these films are starring Ivar Novello, which does fantastic in both. But in The Lodger, or A Story of the London Fog, this is a phenomenal film from Alfred Hitchcock. He considers this film to be his first, even though it is technically his third. He was in Germany for the first two, actually, and you can actually see that German expressionist all over this film and this silent picture, and I love that about this film because the shadows and the different camera movement and angles and even the decor, even though it's set in London, it definitely feels like otherworldly in some manner. But I really like this film. Ivor Novello plays a really fantastic person, but a mysterious young man who comes to take residence at this lodge and this boarding house, and there's actually a killer named the Avenger on the loose who fits his description in some way. So this is a very interesting little take here on that film, and I highly recommend people watching this. It's actually one of the best Hitchcock films of the bunch, and certainly recommend it. I won't talk too much about it just from the sheer fact that the cinematography and the score just I got very involved into it, and I really enjoyed it. But the other film on here is Downhill, and another film starring Ivor Novello. And it's got that wrong man trope that Hitchcock would use, and it is quite a treat as well, and I'm glad that they added this film into this collection. And I enjoyed it. It definitely fails in comparison to The Lodger, but it involves two friends and a false accusation of rape. It doesn't say it in this because it's the 20s, right? But it's definitely implied here. But it's a good film, and I definitely recommend people watching it as a special feature. And there's a lot of special features on this disc alone. So The Lodger, great film, highly recommend it. Might as well watch Downhill as well when you're at it. So let's move on to the next film. All right, so moving on is to the next films, because there's 5 films to talk about in this Hitchcock British International Pictures collection that I picked up from Kino Lorber a few years ago, maybe last year. My time is completely off, but I shelved this when I picked it up because I wasn't necessarily in the mood to watch this, and I got it for a relatively cheap price too. But I wanted to, since I watched The Lodger, watch more Hitchcock films, and there's 4 silents on this particular release and 1 talkie. And so we're going to talk about each one of these films because I watched and deep dived in all of them. So we have The Ring from 27, The Farmer's Wife from 1928, Champagne from 1928, The Manxman from 29, and The Skin Game from 1931. So with The Ring, we have Carl Brisson, Lillian Hall Davis. We'll see both of them a little bit later on. Ian Hunter, Forrester Harvey, Harry Terry, funny name. Gordon Harker is also in this film, who we'll see as well in a little bit. But The Ring is a really great boxer film, and it's really interesting how Hitchcock came about this one. He was just interested in the sport, and he's like, I have never made something like this, so I want to make it. And he made it, and actually it was a really fun film. It's about a love triangle, and Carl Brisson plays our protagonist, more or less, as so does Lillian Hall Davis. But it's really about that love triangle and seeing that perseverance of somebody who's all the way down here facing a champion and then falling in love with a woman trying to get her back, right? And there's that trope. But yeah, I actually like The Ring, and I think it's a fun 27 film. 1927 was a good year for Hitchcock. So the next film we have here is The Farmer's Wife from 1928, also starring Lillian Hall Davis and Gordon Harker from the previous film. We also have Jameson Thomas in here, Maud Gill, Louis Pounds, Olga Slade, and Antonio probably Brow. But The Farmer's Wife is an interesting film. It definitely feels weird in the contemporary time, but it is about a farmer who lost his wife and is trying to replace his love, right? And he's older, and he is looking for the available women in his area that are around. And with the help of his assistant, probably his servant, maybe not so much servant, but something along those lines, is one helping him set up with all these women, and he doesn't realize that she is the one who actually should be with him, and which is a strange thing anyway. But anyway, The Farmer's Wife, it's a fun little comedy, and definitely is very lighthearted, but it's definitely an interesting one, and I would certainly recommend it to add to this collection. Now, moving on from there, from another film from 1928 is Champagne, which is a film that I probably would not recommend. Now, this is starring Betty Balfour, Gordon Harker for the third time, Jack Trevor, Ferdinand von Alten, Marcel Vibert, and Jean Bradin. And I hope I said those names correctly, but Champagne really is about a rich lady, a daughter of a millionaire who marries somebody who is more or less a pauper, and then they head off to France and then just live the life of luxury, but also has to kind of find their own way and get cut off, more or less. And Hitchcock himself said something along the lines of, this story had nothing to tell, which tells you that this is really not really much worth your time, but it is nice to see this film and to watch another Hitchcock film. But Champagne might be one of my least favorite Hitchcock films that I've ever seen. But so moving on from there is The Manxman from 1929. And this is actually the last silent picture that Hitchcock made, and is starring Carl Bresson once again. You know, we saw him in The Ring. We have Malcolm Keane, Annie Andra, and Randall Arton. I don't know. Anywho, The Manxman is an interesting film. It is about the Isle of Man. There's another love triangle. He has a lot of love triangles in these films. He likes to make these comedies. But it's about a lawyer and a fisherman who fall in love with the same woman near the beginning of their friendship. They meet them in their teens, right? And then it keeps going right there from there, and then goes in a lot of different directions. It's an interesting one, and it's a very nice last talk. You'd see a lot of flourishes of what Hitchcock would become later on in his career. So it's a nice one, and I enjoy it. And the last film on here is from 1931, The Skin Game. It is a talkie. And this is starring Edmund Gwynn, Jill Esmond, John Longden, C.V. France, Helen Hay, Phyllis Constam, Frank Lawton, Herbert Ross, Dora Gregory, and so there's a lot of people in this film, but it really is just about these two dueling families, these rich families who are fighting over land. So it's not necessarily the most interesting thing in the world, but it is a little bit less of the upstairs downstairs affair that you would think about something like this. It's more of just these two families who might have some skeletons in their closet, and they're using it to fight each other and kind of rip off everyone else in the way. So anyway, this is actually a really fun overall set. I think I really enjoyed this. I think The Ring, Manxman are probably the two best films in this set. Farmer's Wife is a lot of fun. Whereas Champagne and The Skin Game were probably on the lesser side of things. But regardless, it is just really interesting to jump into this, and there's a lot of really cool special features involved in this as well. There's actually some scores that are added. Meg Morley for The Ring, John Morales for Farmer's Wife, Ben Model for Champagne, and Andrew Earl Simpson for The Manxman. There's also some Hitchcock and Truffaut icon interviews, a commentary on The Ring from film critic Nick Pinkerton, which I have not listened to. Neither did I listen to any of the other commentaries. Commentaries on Champagne and The Manxman by film historian Farron Smith Nemi. So I enjoyed this release, and I definitely recommend it. It's cheap, so if you are wanting to watch some Hitchcock films, some silent pictures, and see kind of where he got a lot of this start, this is a really great set to get. All right, so now we're going to move on to 1939, so we're jumping up to a film that I hadn't seen that I had in my collection from Arrow Academy, is Jamaica Inn. Charles Laughton and Maureen O'Hara star in this film, and I really enjoyed this. In fact, this reminds me of Night Creatures later on that Hammer would make. Just the concept of the banditry involved. But anyway, Jamaica Inn is set in a specific spot in England that happens around this time period where in the 19th century, there near Cornwall, there was people who would wreck ships. And like steal all of the goods and take a lot of the money involved and pretty much kill everyone involved. So it's really interesting because at the very beginning of the film, Maureen O'Hara is trying to go visit her aunt and uncle because her aunt wrote to her. And apparently she didn't, I guess. But anyway, she ends up in this place called Jamaica Inn where we see her uncle kind of is just distraught and this drunk and just is a very troublesome person and very controlling of his aunt and also of Maureen O'Hara's character. And we see this alongside of all the people who are involved in this inn. And then we also have Charles Laughton, who is playing this character who is very scummy, but he is a rich man who lives nearby and is definitely up to nefarious deeds. And I really love the direction of this film. There's really some really great sequences involved. It's really crazy. The shipwrecks in this film were actually on a studio. This film was set in a studio, and it doesn't even look close like it was when it comes to those shipwrecks, because how in the hell did you put that much water into this film? Anyway, you'll see it if you have seen the film. You understand what I'm talking about. But this also has a really iconic ending, and it's kind of crazy to think about. And I really, really enjoyed this film, and I had a really great time with it. And I really enjoy the special features involved with this as well. This is a new 4K digital restoration from Cohen Film Collection and the BFI, and has a few different extra audio commentaries and some visual essays, shipwrecked in the studio, which really dissects that stuff I was talking about, how this is crazy to be in a studio. There's a few other things here with the extra artwork here. This is the artwork from Arrow right there, but I decided to switch it over to just Charles Laughton with a pistol. And so anyway, Jamaica Inn, this is a really great release, and I highly recommend it. All right, moving all the way up to the 50s, we're talking about Dial M for Murder in 3D, which I don't have a 3D TV, so didn't watch that, even though there is a 3D version on this. And actually, I accidentally pushed play on that, and it was all trippy, and I'm like, I need to go back and change it on the menu. But Dial M for Murder, I quite enjoyed this film. It is starring Grace Kelly, Ray Milland, and Robert Cummings, and man, this is the Hitchcock that we know and love. A lot of the Hitchcock that we would grow to understand came around in this time period, and Dial M for Murder is certainly one of those classic films, especially Ray Milland's just performance. Man, it's kind of scary how chilling and calm he was during this whole thing. And there's a lot of really cool twists and turns with this film, all involving keys, which just reminds me of Notorious. And I just love the way that Hitchcock sets this whole stage up, where we're trying to see somebody kill his own wife. And just like I said, the amount of things that go wrong and awry, and the little breadcrumbs that we get here and there, and where the camera is and where things are placed are really, really well executed in this film. And I can't believe that it took me this long to watch this. I've had this in my collection for probably about 3 years, which is insane. And this was another thing that prompted me to decide to do this challenge, is I needed to watch this film because I've had it on my shelf for far too long. And I really, really enjoyed this movie, and I would love to see it eventually in 3D sometime. I know this was the craze in the early 50s, which it quickly died out. So anyway, Dial M for Murder, really fantastic Hitchcock release, one of the best of the bunch that I had seen of this. I would say this and The Lodger are like two of the best that I had mentioned so far. And I'm glad I watched it finally. And so I'm sure there's some people who are like, finally you watched it. And so let me know what you think of it down in the comment section down below. All right, this next film is kind of a cheat, but I wanted to talk about it anyway. This is the 10th film, even though we have a few more left because I decided to add more. It is Hitchcock and Truffaut, the documentary. And this documentary came out in the, let's see, 2015? Yeah, so not that long ago, actually. This is archival interviews and is directed by Kent Jones. And Kent Jones decided to put this all together and kind of map a story and a visual side of the book that happened in the 60s. Actually, this interview that occurred, and we actually got most of it on tape as well. And there's actually a lot of special features on a lot of Hitchcock discs that have little inserts and excerpts from those films, or like their conversation talking about that film, which is really unique and really cool. But I needed to watch this documentary, and I actually quite enjoyed this. It's actually not that long. It's an hour and 21 minutes. So it's perfect length, and I watched it late one last night. And it really talks about Hitchcock's really great works, but also sprinkles in all of the other works that he did, and really how he opened up and had that relationship with Truffaut, because Truffaut was the person who really looked up to him and really saw his uniqueness in Hollywood and also just in film history in general, because I guess around the time in the early 60s, Hitchcock was just kind of known as like the person who's going to make a film and people are going to go see it, but he wasn't really taken seriously from his contemporary peers. Whereas the French movements and the French New Wave, they all loved Hitchcock and they grew up on this stuff. So Truffaut decided to reach out to Hitchcock and ask for an interview, and that's what happened, which is just crazy. And there's actually a great book to it too. And that book is right here, actually. I got the Hitchcock Truffaut book. This is the revised version, 1967, when they met, and he finally published this. This is crazy, man. I am so happy that I finally own this, because I have seen this book everywhere from a lot of my friends, and I know a lot of people. I'm sure you have this on your shelf. A lot of people who like film have this book, and I'm so happy to finally have it, and I'm going to be reading through it, because now I've seen most of Hitchcock's films. I still have quite a few left, but I am super excited to get this, and I had to watch this documentary, and now I have the book. So Hitchcock and Truffaut, super excited to have them both. In addition to Hitchcock and Truffaut, I also decided to pick up the 2012 biographical Hitchcock film right here, which is starring Anthony Hopkins as Alfred Hitchcock, Helen Mirren, Scarlett Johansson, Toni Collette, Danny Huston, Jessica Biel, James D'Arcy. Man, insane lineup. This is actually a light and fun film, although it kind of goes all over the place, so there are some detractors to it, but we see Hitchcock being played by Anthony Perkins, like I said. But seeing Anthony Hopkins as Hitchcock was just fantastic, and I think the director even made it a point where it's like, we don't want him to be Hitchcock, we want him to act like, you know that Anthony Hopkins is right there as Hitchcock, but he's doing his impersonation of him, which is just fantastic. So yeah, there was just a lot of really fun things that really just focused mostly on Psycho and this little snippet of his life, and that kind of gradual shift in the tone of Hitchcock's failures. Like I think North by Northwest had just happened, and it was kind of not a success, and we see something along the lines of Psycho coming up and is going to just blow people out of the water. And it's just it's a fun little film, and it also talks more about Helen Mirren, who is playing about Alma, who is his wife, who I haven't mentioned, who has been ghostwriting a lot of the things that he's been doing and making. And I love Helen Mirren in this the most. I think I love seeing her fleshed out and just having her own unique identity. And I think that's what maybe the specialness from this film in particular kind of showcases. Even though obviously this is glamorized, of course, this is a small snippet of Hitchcock's life. And yeah, I just really enjoyed this film. It's not the best film in the world. It's an autobiographical film. A lot of people are a little bit turned off to these and are like a little bit nitpicky with, did this actually happen during this time or whatnot? It's a movie, and this is just an adaptation. And to me, I had a fun time with it, and I enjoyed the ride alongside it, and just kind of seeing a modern take on this time period and what it looked like. And it was a lot of fun, and there's a lot of fun people involved as well, like Scarlett Johansson, of course. And yeah, even Toni Collette had a small little role in here as well. So anyway, Hitchcock, literally fun film right there. But I'm actually not done, because I decided there was a Kino Lorber sale that just recently happened, and there was a few other Hitchcock titles that I had not picked up. Yeah, so I decided to continue with that, and I actually picked up the number 17 and Rich and Strange, and I actually watched them both, so I can tell you a little bit about them both. So number 17, this is from 1932, another talkie, and this is actually a fun comedy thriller, all set in one location, but it's just a shit ton of people in here. Way too many people, actually. Beginning of this film, there's an empty house, and we have a detective going in, and there's this body that gets discovered, and the hijinks kind of ensues from there. And there's a lot of people, some of them crashing through the ceiling. It's actually quite a fun time, but although it is a little bit confusing and meandering, and the play actually did not translate too well to the screen, because this is based on a play, so even Hitchcock didn't necessarily think it was the greatest thing. But it is a fun thing to have on top of it. But it also came with a really great documentary, Hitchcock: The Early Years, which really talks about all those silent pictures I already mentioned earlier. And so I'm very excited to jump into other films such as Murder, right, or Blackmail, which I have coming in the mail, actually. You know, these are the things that I do because I'm addicted to Hitchcock now. So anyway, number 17, fun film, really great documentary attached to it with some other great special features as well. And now moving on to the last one I want to talk about is Rich and Strange, the movie I watched last night, actually. And another film from the early 30s, this is from 31. And this is also known as East of Shanghai. And this is a nice little comedy, almost like a slapstick, one of those slapstick comedies that you would see a little bit later on in the late 30s, which would really come up and like become a really great genre. But this film in particular, this is a nice little story, but it does suffer a little bit because it is an early talkie. There is these weird transitions. The audio is a little bit unbearable sometimes. You can't actually, it's incomprehensible in some moments because the music is just, the sound is just so muddled and mixed. But the BFI actually did a really great 4K transformation here, restoration of the film itself, and I think they do a really fantastic job. So overall, Rich and Strange was fun, and this entire venture is fun. And like I said, I have some things coming in the mail, and I also have this Hitchcock Truffaut book. This is not going to stop. So that is my Spotlight Challenge. I decided to go with Alfred Hitchcock. There's going to be more Spotlight Challenges in the future, talking about different people in the film industry, of course, and I cannot wait to jump into that. So anyway, I want to say thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you can join along and do a Spotlight Challenge for yourself. I hope you enjoyed it. Give it a like, share, hit the notification bell, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. I'm not jonesing around.